The Legend of Zelda series has always epitomized the philosophy of video games as passion projects, deriving from places of inspiration, heart, and a creative spark. While developing the Wind Waker, Eiji Aonuma was adamantly against using the art style from the GameCube demo reel, calling it derivative. This wasn't what I imagined Zelda to be. It wasn't the Zelda I wanted to make. Mr. Miyamoto and Mr. Tezuka agreed, and with no fan or sales pressure to weigh their team down, the creative ideas flooded in. With many ideas for Wind Waker left on the cutting room floor, the plan afterward was to create a direct sequel. But in the early 2000s, the video game industry was seeing an awkward adolescent phase, where mature games like Halo and Grand Theft Auto were all the rage, the PlayStation 2 was dominating the market, and fewer people seemed to care about Zelda or Nintendo's silly cube. So the Wind Waker was not received well by many fans, and with the resulting poor performance, Nintendo initiated a plan to pander to the Western market and boost sales. Now, in my opinion, I find that developers choosing to abandon creative intuition and give in to fan demand generally leads to a disastrous product.
Since when does anyone have a clue about what they want?
But I also understand the business side of things, necessitating Aonuma to pitch the idea of a return to a realistic art style to Miyamoto, who basically responded with, okay. He acknowledged that there were very many people out there who wanted Link to change. So the Wind Waker 2 was abandoned, and Aonuma started work on the derivative game he did not want to make. Approaching the new Zelda game from this mindset would ultimately prove extremely challenging to the Zelda team. An overwhelmingly hype reaction to the live reveal trailer in 2004 exacerbated a feeling of nervousness of satisfying the fans.
たちにこの作品をちゃんとゲームも届けないといけないという。
So with this uneasy philosophy driving development, the Zelda team ended up throwing everything they could think of at the wall to see what would stick. The result is Twilight Princess, a game that feels patched together, as if its existence was purposed to scratch an itch, checking a bunch of boxes with no regard for a foundation to hold them all together. But they were extremely careful not to neglect the one thing that everybody truly craves: familiarity. People don't like things that are different. We like our comfort food with our comfort shows and our comfort music. Twilight Princess feels like comfort Zelda. The remaining components of the game read like a who's who of classic Zelda staples. We've got Ganondorf, Hyrule, and Epona, the Master Sword, the Sages, and the Triforce, forest, fire, and water temples. The whole member berry pie is on deck to provide what on the surface is looking to be the most definitive Zelda experience ever. But as I've studied the progression of the Zelda series over the past 2 years, and talked in the previous episode about what has made each individual entry so unique and memorable, I'm not convinced that stitching all of these elements together instantly makes a good Zelda game. And even without studying the game's development history or keeping in mind the context of its release, it becomes clear upon playing Twilight Princess that even despite all the classic Zelda-y stuff, something about it feels off. And that's what this essay is going to discuss. So let's dive in and find out how Twilight Princess fits within the world of The Legend of Zelda, how it evolves the series, how it regresses the series, and what we can learn from it moving forward. The game's title screen opens with Link riding around Hyrule Field on Epona behind a very beautiful rendition of the Zelda 1 title theme. Interestingly, Twilight Princess does not begin with any sort of backstory or history of Hyrule. Just Link and his friends sitting on the grass talking about the sunset. It begs the question, is there no relevant backstory that connects this game to another, or will we just learn about it later? Either way, I've always liked the way this sort of big epic adventure opens on such a low-key note. We open in Ordon Village, and the game wastes no time in displaying its unabashed conservatism as we exit our tree house to meet our childhood friend, meander around the town to gather enough rupees to buy a slingshot, make a quick rescue mission to the nearby forest, and find our path blocked by a brat until we present a sword. The opening of Twilight Princess is paced slower than ever, with many other menial tasks to indulge, including catching fish for a cat, recovering a cradle from a troublesome monkey, showing off to the village kids, and herding goats into a barn. Twice. During our foray into the neighboring woods, we find the Lantern making its 3D Zelda debut in awesome fashion. Twilight Princess features some great lighting, and the Lantern serves it wonderfully, making you feel more poised for spelunking and dungeon diving. It has a unique oil mechanic and can even be attached to your hip while using other items. All in all, a great addition to Twilight Princess, but with one huge, fatal, crippling flaw. There are no fucking dark areas in the game! Besides this one short cave here in Faron and 2 more optional ones elsewhere, there's literally no point where you ever need to pull the lantern out to light up your surroundings. There is no Shadow Temple, no spooky graveyard, no dark rooms and dungeons, and nighttime in the field is nice and bright. It's ironic that we've come full circle from Zelda 1 suffering from too many dark rooms to Twilight Princess featuring too few, a sad waste of a promising idea. Despite being derivative of Kokiri Forest and Outset Island, Ordon Village is less interesting and enjoyable than either in terms of design, aesthetics, and music. The trade-off is that the residents of Ordon are more distinct and memorable. Our childhood friend is Elia, who is brash and quick to anger, but extremely kind-hearted. Unfortunately, this is the extent of the insight we are given into her character. Like Saria, her relationship with Link is never explored or developed, and we aren't given too much reason to care about her. There's also Colin, a meek and insufferable twerp who gets his contrived moment of bravery later. My favorite kid is Mallow, who despite being the youngest kiddo in town, behaves like a sarcastic asshole adult. This overlong stint in the village and the forest acts as a tutorial of the game's controls, which needless to say, are pretty fucking terrible. What the fuck was that? I'll tell you what it was. Remember that stupid thing in Wind Waker, how after climbing up from a ladder, Link will run straight forward regardless of the camera direction? This was because of some weird stored input thing that not only returns in Twilight Princess, it is doubled down on. It now happens after centering the camera, a basic necessary action, so pretty frequently you will end up holding left or right but running straight forward, which is incredibly annoying. You'll also do shit like jump onto a vine and start climbing it sideways. There are 3 versions of the game and each come with their own share of additional control issues. The GameCube version gives us no option to uninvert the Y-axis, which was questionable 8 years ago but inexcusable by this point. But hoping for options in a Nintendo game is like hoping for happiness in your future. The Wii version clutters up the screen with shit and removes a number of important features such as camera control, instant item swapping, and quick spin attacks. There's also no way of dismounting your horse without coming to a full stop, and no option to disable the silly waggling sword controls. Now don't get me wrong, I am a huge fan of motion controls, but not 2006 motion controls that were hastily tacked on to a GameCube game. Following in the spirit of the Wii version, the 2016 remake of Twilight Princess also was not optimized for its hardware. When playing with the Wii U gamepad, there was a huge input delay that is not present in the Wind Waker HD. How does that happen in a first-party title? When I switch to the Pro Controller, the lag is gone, but then so are my gyro controls, quick item swapping, and the nifty button to instantly transform into Wolf. Why do I have to pick and choose between 2 shitty control options? You'd think after 10 years and 2 generations of consoles that improving the controls would be a given, but in an accurate reflection of the HD version as a whole, 0 effort was made to improve them. The annoying stored movements after centering the camera were not fixed, and for some reason, Epona now controls really badly. In the original versions, the horse controlled tightly, a terrific improvement on Ocarina, and I have absolutely no difficulty in riding full speed through narrow passages. But now there's some sort of gigantic dead zone causing her to jerk from side to side, and trying to navigate through even moderately narrow passages is an exercise in extreme frustration. Horseback combat in turn becomes a tedious nightmare. Fuck. Perhaps most unforgivable a failure of this version is the absence of moving while aiming, which was easily the best addition to Wind Waker HD. I have no idea why this was axed, as this game would have benefited from it even more so than Wind Waker. There are a lot of moments in Twilight Princess where you are being pelted with arrows and need to fire your bow with speed and precision. Maybe they thought that would make this version too easy? As if that's suddenly a fucking problem? For Twilight Princess HD to have this many control issues is completely intolerable, considering it released a measly 1 year before Breath of the Wild, which controls sensationally. Fuck, going from that to this is painful, and it's hard to accept that the HD version fails this badly when there was a tremendous necessity to update and refresh a game that in many areas has not aged well. As confirmed by Miyamoto and Aonuma, the art style of Twilight Princess was chosen to appease Western fans, but the problem is, this was 2004, where realistic-looking graphics were simply destined to look like crap after a few years. What's nice about a game like Wind Waker is that it goes for a specific aesthetic, and this aesthetic caters to the limitations of the hardware. There's a reason why these types of games that go for style over realism are among the most memorable from that age, because they aren't destined to be outclassed and overshadowed by nicer graphics in the future. I've refrained from talking about graphics so far in this series, but Twilight Princess unfortunately kind of necessitates it, because it's the only Zelda game where the visual style was the primary cornerstone of development. The graphics, sadly, are the defining feature of Twilight Princess. It's the game that looks like the Zelda we always wanted. You think just any other Zelda could have elicited this kind of response? This is one of those things that might make Twilight Princess feel a little stale after the initial Phantom Menace effect wears off. Its entire existence was meant to fill a specific purpose at a specific time, and the effect that has had on the game's staying power is unmistakable. Now when it came time for the HD version to reinvigorate Twilight Princess, the end result fell entirely flat. I remember watching the first trailer for it and waiting for the wipe to reveal the new footage, only to realize after a good 10 seconds that, oh wow, this was the new footage. Fuck. The reality is, if you want to improve on the aesthetic of a game that is clearly a product of its time, you have to put in a lot of work. Ocarina of Time 3D is a great example of this. They didn't just slap a paint job on Ocarina and call it a day. They completely reimagined the aesthetic and drew all new scenes and sets. And Link's Awakening, of course, is an even better example of this. Twilight Princess HD, by comparison, is an absolute travesty. This game needed the treatment that these other games got, because slapping on a coat of spit shine does nothing to mask the bleak environments, dull color scheme, unpleasant character models, and goofy overlapping textures. I don't mean to say that Twilight Princess is an ugly game overall. It kills in the lighting department, and there are absolutely moments of beauty, such as in the Sacred Grove and the Palace of Twilight. But the visuals are definitely a weak point of the game, and it's a shame that for the second time in a row, we have a lazy remake that does nothing to extend the legacy of the original, and if anything makes it feel even more dated. There are no substantial differences besides a hero mode that is still extremely easy, a wolf combat zone that is inconsequential, and a slight reduction in the number of tiers of light in some sections, which usually just means there are now 2 bugs congregated in a spot instead of 3. All this, in combination with the crappy control issues and the removal of the great features of the Wind Waker remake, make Twilight Princess HD far from the ideal version of the game, and one of the most skippable ports I've ever played. Back in Ordon Village, the story kicks off after a giant orc man called the Bulblin King kidnaps Elia, and Link sets off after her and ends up at an eerie glowing gate at the entrance of the Faron Woods. And it's here that the complexion of the game changes dramatically. A monster hand reaches from beyond the veil and pulls Link into the Twilight Realm, where he suddenly transforms into a wolf and is dragged all the way across Hyrule to the dungeon of Hyrule Castle. It's the most abrupt tonal shift yet seen in the series, and the ensuing sequence of escaping the dungeon with no idea of what's going on or where we are is super intense and unforgettable. In-game, the explanation for Link transforming into a wolf is a bit vague, something about a prophecy from the Twilight Realm of a hero appearing as a beast. The actual explanation is much simpler. Mr. Aonuma had a dream about a wolf one night while his team was struggling to come up with ideas of what to put in their game. Anyway, Link awakens chained in a cell and is greeted by the breakout star of Twilight Princess. Midna is unlike anyone else in the series to this point, in that she is a fully fleshed out, dynamic character who, in most respects, is actually the main protagonist of the story. She has her own complex background, motivations, and goals, and initially sees Link as merely a means to an end, which is to destroy Zant, the false king of her people who cursed and exiled her. Over the course of the story, she grows and changes like a real character, starting off extremely apathetic toward Link's plight, but selflessly fighting tooth and nail for him by game's end. In terms of the evolution of the Zelda series, a character like Midna is absolutely Twilight Princess's contribution, as she would pave the way for some equally strong characters in the series' future. But Midna will always be memorable as refreshingly sassy, impatient and selfish, but also passionate as fuck and emotional deep down. Even her mannerisms in the day-to-day are iconic. After all these years, I still emulate her yawn in real life. As a companion, Midna is actually mostly tolerable, less annoying and intrusive than Navi and Eslo, and funnier than Tattle. It helps that the text speed of Twilight Princess rockets by at breakneck speed, and that cutscenes are skippable, both of which strengthening the game's replay value. Midna frees Link from his cell and hitches a ride on his back, and in escaping the dungeon we get our first taste of Wolf Link's abilities. He controls the same as in human form, except slightly worse, because with 4 legs he can no longer turn around on a dime, which makes it easier to fall off of ledges and things like that. It's not a big deal most of the time, but it's enough to cause several moments of frustration. He can also sense invisible objects, follow scent trails, tunnel under gates and into grottos, and best of all, lock onto Midna to quickly leap around the environment. Overall, although I don't particularly dislike the concept of the wolf transformation, the whole idea is pretty baffling to me and I struggle to find the value it adds to the game. Story-wise, it's close to inconsequential, feeling like a repeat of the Link to the Past Dark World transformation, and with no important consequences or revelations ever coming of it. Even though he's the supposed hero of the Twilight Realm, the Twilight people don't even react to him in any way. Gameplay-wise, his abilities are ones we've seen before, from items like the shovel and the Lens of Truth, and combat is mostly unchanged. It's impossible not to draw a comparison to Majora's Mask, which completely floors Twilight Princess with 3 unique transformations with way more interesting mechanics and abilities. Far from a game changer and barely passing as an interesting concept, it's apparent that the creative staff didn't have a clear vision for what to do with the idea. Following the guidance of Midna, Link is able to escape the dungeon and climb into one of the castle's towers where we meet Princess Zelda. In terms of her design, this version of Zelda is pretty amazing. Personality-wise, she has no personality. The art style of Twilight Princess doesn't lend itself to very expressive character models, Midna notwithstanding, and so to compensate there needed to be some moderately compelling writing. This of course is a problem for Link, who doesn't talk at all. In the last game, Link was brimming with emotion and personality, which helped attach the player to the world and the events going on around him. Twilight Princess Link fluctuates only between bewilderment and apathy, effectively reverting to his ocarina role of a simple avatar for the player to project onto. The problem with this is twofold. For one, when you have a game that makes important progress in this regard, it's not as acceptable to regress and undo that evolution. The other is that Ocarina of Time Link is far more important to the events of that game's story, making him a stronger link between the player and the game world. Twilight Princess Link, as I alluded to earlier, is not even the main character of his game, so I find him more dull than ever. And I can't stand his stupid face. Every other character is written so badly you'd think they walked right off the finale of Insert Joke Here. Nobody seems to have any passion, and as a result it's much harder to care about anything as it's going on. This scene with Zelda is no exception. It's an expository scene where she explains about how Zant, the king of the Twilight Realm, invaded Hyrule and forced her to surrender by threatening to wipe out every citizen. It's also the beginning of Twilight Princess's many, many plot holes and logical inconsistencies, which go way beyond nitpicks. When they happen over and over and I have to question every line of dialogue, every basic motive of each character, and every event that transpires, and nothing makes sense, it becomes utterly impossible to get invested in the story. So in this scene, Zant arrives to sack Hyrule Castle, Zelda surrenders, and Zant's monsters overtake the guardian light spirits of Hyrule, which causes the kingdom to begin succumbing to twilight. Within the twilight, the citizens appear as spirits, but to this they somehow remain unaware. So what, it's just business as usual? Well, yeah, most of the spirit people that you talk to are just going about their lives, shopping, running their businesses, gossiping. Wow, what a great and intimidating threat. Usually when a country is being occupied, there are ramifications that are felt by everyone. In Ocarina of Time, the takeover of Hyrule is felt by the refugees of Kakariko Village and by the chaos in every area. Twilight Princess neglects this almost entirely, creating a disconnect between what I assume we are meant to feel and what we actually feel. Zelda continues by saying that after the kingdom succumbed to the Twilight, she remained its princess. What? This diabolical Death Lord, who invaded with an army of giant monsters, let her keep her post? Maybe she's just being dramatic. I remain the princess of the darkness in my soul. But whatever she's the princess of, she appears to spend all her time brooding in this tower, probably listening to 2006's best emo music.
Don't you breathe on me, undeserving of your sympathy.
It's not explained how she's able to keep her human form in the Twilight, but we can assume it's the Triforce of Wisdom. Although Link and Ganondorf both transform, I guess they drew the short ends of the Triforce. After leaving My Chemical Princess, Midna says that she might be able to help Link save Ilia if he is willing to be her errand boy and go along with whatever she needs. She takes him back to Ordon Village to gather a sword and shield, and then back to the Faron Woods where he was initially dragged into the Twilight. Here we meet the crippled light spirit of Faron, and we learn that we can expel the Twilight from the area if we are able to revive him. This entails collecting 16 Tears of Light, which are hidden in bugs scattered around the forest. It sounds like unpleasant busy work, and it's exactly that. It's clear by this point that the pacing of Twilight Princess is sporadic and nonsensical, and it never stabilizes. For this section, we are collecting tears in an area that we have already familiarized ourselves with. There are 2 more sections of tier collecting later in the game, in the remaining provinces of Eldin and Lanayru. Of the 3, only the Eldin section is not a complete slog, the reason being that it's the only one that takes place in an unfamiliar area. You are exploring a new region as you collect the tiers, so it doesn't feel as much like a chore. But this inherently creates another strange problem in the pacing, where after lifting the Twilight from an area, exploring it in the light world feels less satisfying since you've already familiarized yourself with it. Granted, this doesn't mean there is less to do in these areas, as there's still plenty of fun things to rediscover that you couldn't interact with while in the Twilight. But even so, there's a noticeable feeling of diminished exploration that is unique to this game. After collecting the tears from Faron Province and restoring the Light Spirit, Link awakens back in his human form, garbed in the green tunic of the Hero of Time. It's great that we're finally connecting to a previous game, and we'll learn more about how Twilight Princess connects with Ocarina later. But somehow the moment feels out of place in this game. The Light Spirit calls Link the destined hero and gives him the tunic, only it never becomes relevant because, again, Link is not even an important character in the story. He never becomes the hero of Twilight or whatever, and Ganondorf and Zelda mostly address Midna and barely register his presence. The moment doesn't feel earned. But since the Light Spirit called us a hero, that means it's time to head to the Forest Temple.
Because that's what heroes do.
I guess we're destined to take down Zant all of a sudden? Mostly though, we're still just blindly following Midna's direction in the vague hope that she can help save Ilia. To reach the temple, we have to pass through the woods a 3rd goddamn time, following a slow-ass monkey through a fog in the video game equivalent of being stuck in traffic. Padding is not new to the series, but Twilight Princess, as we will continue to see, takes it too far, and it will only get worse before it gets better. Before reaching the temple, we run into the Hero Shade, an ancient skeletal warrior who alludes to being the original Hero of Time Link from Ocarina, a theory later confirmed by the Zelda Encyclopedia. He teaches Link the ending blow, which I find very funny because Link didn't know anything of the sort in Ocarina, but it's a nifty combat skill that destroys grounded enemies. In Wind Waker, it could get a little annoying when an enemy falls down and you couldn't hit them until they got back up, so this is a welcome solution. Otherwise, swordplay in Twilight Princess is identical to that of Wind Waker's, besides the notable absence of parry attacks. These have been rebranded into the Backslice and the Helm Splitter, which can be performed at will once learned from the Hero's Shade. There are 7 hidden skills to learn in all, but these are the only 3 that are even remotely useful, as the remaining ones are situational at best, which is a nice way of saying goddamn useless. The final skill is the Great Spin, which is a beefed up spin attack that can only be executed at full health. Like the Great Spin in Minish Cap, it trivializes combat, if that were even possible, because the sad truth is, the combat in Twilight Princess is the easiest it's ever been. There are few, if any, challenging enemies in this entire game, as the vast majority of your opponents will either die after a simple 4-hit combo, or they will fall down, at which point an ending blow is enough to finish them off. Enemies that somehow resist this are generally still laughable pushovers. Darknuts show up in the latter half of the game but are incredibly slow, simple to dodge, and don't attack in the same formidable groups that they did in Wind Waker. If you have the hidden skills, which by the way none of the hidden skills are even remotely hidden, but if you have the Backslice and Helm Splitter, then you can make even shorter work of Darknuts. Just swing until he blocks, then do a Helm Splitter if he's armored or a Backslice if he's not, and repeat. The only way you'll even get hit is by inadvertently Helm Splittering into the force field. Dinothos are a very sparse but solid enemy, who will actually punish your ending blow, but once you learn to stop attempting it, they too become very easy. Aerolthos are another passable enemy that require you to drag them out of the air by their shield, which sadly is designed exactly like a claw shot target, giving the whole tactic away. And these are the only 3 that can even hope to pass as decent enemies. Against a Reedhead, you can simply mash A in wolf form, and no longer do they creepily climb onto your back and suck your neck, now just a chop with their blade. And Stalthos are destroyed by a single bomb arrow, unless you're feeling nostalgic, in which case you can collapse them with your sword and plant a bomb on their remains in a Link to the Past fashion. One dungeon features annoying ice enemies including Wolfos, who dodge projectiles and camp you out in an effort to painfully drag on the fight, and Chilthos, who throw spears and attack in groups but are shattered by the Helm Splitter. The lack of even remotely tough enemies and the absence of any real combat challenges of course negates a lot of the utility of the game's items. There are some potentially useful combat items in this game that sadly never get an opportunity to shine, such as the Ball and Chain. It's a huge and heavy device that causes Link to lumber around slowly while holding it. It's useful in its dungeon for shattering the ice enemies, but after that it's almost never practical to take it out again, as there are no enemies with armor that need to be crushed or giant enemies that need to be crippled or anything like that. The Dominion Rod is used to breathe life into statues and control them, which can be used in its dungeon to crush the little Gomas, but for some reason it can't be used directly on enemies that are literally statues. It would have been fun to pit Armos against each other. The Boomerang has been given a wind effect and is now the Gale Boomerang, and I am not a fan. Combat-wise, it's a step down as it no longer damages enemies and instead just brings them towards you. It also has to be manually locked onto targets instead of auto-locking like in Wind Waker. It's not fun, the puzzles are basically regular boomerang puzzles anyway, and there were a few moments where I could have used an actual boomerang. Bombelings are a new type of bomb that scurry after enemies, making them more like bomb chews from the Oracle games, but again they're never practical and you'll probably just forget you have them for the most part. I tried my goddamn best to use every item I could to spruce up the combat, but the game just never invites opportunities for this. And what's the point when simply mashing B is so much quicker and more efficient? Mashing A or B is the new Twilight Princess standard for combat, aided by the new mechanic of auto-locking onto a new enemy after your current one is defeated. Additionally, while targeting, Link automatically holds up his shield, which blocks nearly everything, so even this most basic element of defensive strategy is completely removed. It's as if combat has become a fucking auto-battle system. Just hold Z and mash, my friends. Mash until every monster is gone.
It's now the mash,
It's now the Monster Mash.
the monster mash.
If for some reason you don't think combat is trivial enough, say hello to bomb arrows. Returning from Link's Awakening, these absolute beasts will one-shot pretty much every enemy in the game and are readily available. Bombs for some reason are no longer random drops, but you can hold up to a freakishly high 180 of them, as well as 100 arrows which already drop like candy. Even regular arrows are powerful as fuck, one-shotting most enemies that you need them to, and the bow in Twilight Princess is utterly fantastic, probably the best bow in the series to this point. It's extremely fast and accurate and the sound effects are terrific. Sound design is another thing that I've yet to really talk about in this series, but damn if Twilight Princess's sound effects aren't the best we've yet heard. The two remaining items that I want to talk about are transportation items, the spinner and the claw shots. The spinner is like a big top that Link can ride around on. It was shown off before the game's release and everyone was stoked because of how fun it looked. Little did we know that they were showing us the entirety of the spinner footage in the entire fucking game. For context, we only get 10 minutes of spinner in its own damn dungeon, and that's including the boss. And after this dungeon, of course, you'll only take it out for 10 seconds sporadically because of some gap in a staircase or to spin a cog. In the Stallard boss room, the spinner zooms around super fast. Why isn't this just the default speed for the spinner everywhere, instead of in this one meaningless room? It'd make it into one of the most fun transportation items in series history. But anywhere else, the spinner is as slow as it is useless. It's a fun item for its 10 minutes of fame, but it's clear that this was another idea someone had that no one had any clue what to do with. After being absent from the last game and lackluster in the previous one, the hook shot makes a triumphant resurgence as the claw shot, with the big difference being that Link will cling on to whatever object he grapples to instead of just falling. It's used for a ton of wonderfully unique puzzles, as you can grapple onto P-hats and ride them to new areas, as well as lower yourself on the chain to squeeze through gaps. It's already the best hook shot in the series, and I love that it finally gets its game to shine, but it gets escalated even higher after we acquire a second one. With a claw shot on each hand, Link is able to Spider-Man swing from target to target, which is used extensively in an awesome floating dungeon with little solid ground and a mid-air dragon fight. Needless to say, it's Twilight Princess's best item. So that's a pretty robust assortment of creative new tools, but one of Twilight Princess's most well-known issues is the lack of utility and significance in these items. For the most part, they are only used in their respective dungeons and are lucky to receive a passing glance for the rest of the game. So in effect, by game's end, you have a big collection of silly souvenirs that don't improve or empower Link. As a result, there's a lot less growth for the character. Going back to previous games for reference, in Ocarina of Time, Link grows a lot over the course of the game, and the end result is entirely visible. He's holding a big-ass sword, a shiny mirror shield, golden gauntlets, and hover boots and light arrows. It's a critical visual distinction for the pacing of the game. The Link facing Ganondorf is nowhere near the Link that pulled the Master Sword. Neither is he in Wind Waker, where visually he doesn't grow as much, but emotionally we see him mature from silly goofball trying to save his sister to awakened hero fulfilling his destiny. But in Twilight Princess, the Link facing Ganondorf is the exact Link that pulled the Master Sword. Visually, he's the same, as there is no better shield than the Hylian shield, no better sword than the Master Sword, no glove or boot upgrades, and no tunic upgrades besides the silly magic armor, which I put on at the end of the game just to fabricate some illusion of visual growth. And emotionally, he's the same too. Since he has no character, he in turn has no character development. When I make the claim that Twilight Princess did not come from a place of heart and inspiration, this is the kind of thing that reinforces that. One of my favorite things about Zelda games is the growth of Link, reflecting the effort of you, the player, and this is disturbingly absent from Twilight Princess. As a result, the entire quest inherently feels unsatisfying. So finally, after what feels like forever, we arrive at the first dungeon, which takes place inside the Great Banyan Grove Tree. Despite the dungeon item, the Forest Temple is a very good opening dungeon, and it's shockingly long, clocking in at 40 minutes even if you know what you're doing. For my playthrough, it ended up being the second longest in the game, which for a first dungeon is absolutely bonkers. Thankfully, the aesthetic is great. The shrubbery all over the walls can be climbed for small rupee rewards, and the central theme of rescuing monkeys to swing across gaps is pretty fun. It's mostly straightforward, but there's at least one moment of backtracking as well as a tricky hidden key atop a pillar. There are also 2 heart pieces hidden in every dungeon. It's not the first Zelda game to have heart pieces in dungeons, that was Minish Cap, or indirectly Wind Waker, where you could find treasure charts that lead to heart pieces. Probably, I didn't actually check them. Anyways, the 2 heart pieces are always cunningly hidden, requiring solving the dungeon's most devious puzzles, exploring the most out-of-reach places, or backtracking to previous rooms with the dungeon item in hand. For this reason, I think it's worth getting all of these dungeon heart pieces, and by extension, I think it's well worth gathering all of Twilight Princess's 45 heart pieces, a number that is second highest in series history. After disposing of the dungeon's incredibly easy boss, we acquire the object that Midna was after from here, which is called a Fused Shadow. She doesn't explain what it is, but still strings us along to gather more of them. It becomes really apparent by now that there is no narrative thrust in Twilight Princess. At this point, it's still vaguely saving Ilia, and taking down Zant, I guess, but even after the plot expands, there's still a prevailing sense of why are we doing what we're doing. But for now, it's time to head to Hyrule Field, making its first return since Ocarina of Time, but quite different in many ways. First of all, obviously it's much prettier, especially this opening section, and the music is more high energy. But the biggest change is to its structure, which reflects the structure of Twilight Princess's pacing as a whole. Hyrule Field is divided into sections, which open up piece by piece in a linear fashion, making it less of a hub and more of a road. In the past, upon entering Hyrule Field, you could visit every connected area, and more often than not, even if you weren't due there yet, you could find something to do and be rewarded with items and upgrades. I obviously don't believe that every game needs to capture the same spirit as Ocarina of Time, and although I'm a huge fan of that game's rewarding exploration loops, I can appreciate a shift in structure. But what a shift it is. At this point in South Hyrule Field, there are no areas to visit and only one direction you can take, which leads to the next province of Twilight. As far as the field itself, there is only a single heart piece and 2 golden bugs, which are a new collectible. So it feels like something is missing when such a large open field serves essentially no purpose. Nintendo evidently thought so too, because for the next 3D game, they decided to just do away with open fields completely. The remaining Hyrule Field sections we'll eventually discover are the Northern and Western Fields, Kakariko Gorge, Bridge of Eldin, and the Great Bridge of Hylia. These areas are connected by a bunch of narrow and sometimes very long passages, making the whole thing feel kind of disjointed. This is exacerbated by transition screens between the areas, but this doesn't happen all the time, only on certain routes, so that's kind of weird. You can further connect the fields by bumming rocks or completing side quests such as rebuilding a bridge or empowering a Goron to smash a boulder. There's not always a tangible purpose for doing so, however. But eventually, I guess, if you wanted, you can connect every area and then take Epona on a great loop around the field. Unfortunately, the Wind Waker thing of pointing Epona in a direction and looking around freely is gone, but despite this, I have to admit, riding around the field is strangely relaxing. Until it's not. Despite the weird disjointed structure, pretty much every individual section of Hyrule Field is terrifically fun to dick around in, and there's actually a lot of interesting things to do. This is further reason to go for all 45 heart pieces, because then you will have purpose to experience all of these moments. At Bridge of Eldin, you can climb up onto the high cliffs around the area to eventually find a heart piece, walk a statue across the bridge to fill a gap that lets you climb up to the top of the bridge, claw shot up to a higher ledge where you can discover a secret fire cave, and carry a barrel of hot spring water to invigorate a Goron. In a connecting path off of the west field, you can actually pull the spinner out for a brief moment and ride up the walls to a heart piece. You can also whip out the spinner in the small field just south of the castle and try and time a jump to a chest, but this one only has rupees in it. Wait, what the fuck is that? Miiver's stamp. Whose idea was this? I needed that orange rupee, you goddamn asshole! From this section of the field, you can also jump down into Lake Hylia, which is neat, but for some reason you can't jump off of the Great Bridge into the lake, which makes no sense. Especially because you literally have to do exactly that earlier in the game. In ways like this, the world is very oddly connected, or rather disconnected. Initially, you can only get back into Lake Hylia by jumping from that field, or by paying for a gliding game near the Great Bridge, or by going up to Zora's River and renting a boat, or by bombing an underwater rock in a graveyard on the other side of the world? I mean, that makes sense to me. And then to get out of Lake Hylia, you have to be shot out of a cannon, and this is also the only way to reach the desert, which is completely isolated from the rest of Hyrule. It's all so weird. Everything feels stitched together with no cohesion. Then there's Snow Peak, which is accessible from Zora's domain, but only when the game allows it, because a random iceberg will melt at some specific point. This is some Minish Cap shit that I can't stand. In most Zelda games, you're allowed to dip into an area even if you aren't prepared for it, so it's a satisfying feeling to come back later when you have the necessary equipment. Snow Peak is no different. You need a certain scent to get through the blizzard, so blocking it off accomplishes nothing besides further limiting exploration, which is already a struggling point for Twilight Princess. In lieu of the traditional mountains and cliffs that separate areas in Zelda games, Twilight Princess features huge bottomless canyons. I like it. It's weird, in a good way. It makes me wonder what the geological history of this world was that made all these fissures appear. But for now though, we're confined to just this one section of the field, and the only direction that's not blocked off leads east towards the next province of Eldin. This time the tear hunt takes place in Kakariko Village, where the tears are hidden in buildings, and we have to find ways inside by shattering windows, tunneling underneath, and committing arson. After restoring the area, we are reunited with the village kids, but Ilia is not with them, meaning we still get to be at the mercy of Midna for a while. In the light, Kakariko Village looks pretty unique, like a rundown old western town. I'm not the biggest fan personally of the aesthetic and the music, but I like it for being different, and it's still a fun place to explore with lots of secrets. What's actually embarrassingly bad is the graveyard. I'm not sure what exactly they were going for, but what the fuck kind of graveyard is this? It's not dark or spooky, but brown and bright. I guess it's more realistic or something, but come on, this is a fantasy game and graveyards are meant to be scary. It wouldn't be so much of a problem if there was a shadow temple or any other moment of horror in the game, but there's nothing. After another bout of rough padding involving heading back to Ordon Village to sumo wrestle the mayor, we return to Kakariko Village to discover that King Boblin is up to his shenanigans again. Oh no, he's got my twerp! Anyway, up Death Mountain we go. Oh, I guess we have to save him. So now it's time to execute the flagship idea that Nintendo had for Twilight Princess, horseback fighting. It's okay. I could live without it. This Bridge of Eldin set piece is cool, but after knocking poor King Boblin into a chasm, we have to endure the cringiest fucking pose ever. Skip! So after that little diversion, we can head back up Death Mountain, where we get to throw Gorons off cliffs. Apparently wearing iron boots also gives Link super strength. Death Mountain is embarrassingly pitiful. It's even smaller than in Ocarina, features almost nothing to do, and is aesthetically boring. The dungeon here is Goron Mines, which is a solid if slightly unremarkable dungeon featuring giant magnet cranes. The iron boots are given a great new magnetic ability, allowing you to rocket onto walls and walk upside down on the ceiling. I love shooting a Dodongo and watching him fall upward. But the dungeon is a bit too simple. At no point are you asked to position the magnet cranes in a certain way or anything like that, and walking on the ceiling, while novel, is also extremely tedious. After defeating another equally easy boss and collecting the Fused Shadow, Midna finally tells us Xanth's name, pretty much out of the blue. No other plot details are learned though, so still no narrative thrust to send us in the direction of the Lanayru province and another bout of Twilight. But this time there's a lot to be done before even reaching the spirit to start collecting the tears. Shortly into the long trek across northern Hyrule Field, we encounter Ilia's satchel, and we can follow her scent to finally locate her in a tavern in Hyrule Castle Town. As a spirit, there's nothing to do for her just yet, so instead we head towards Lake Hylia. But oh no! All the water is gone! And Zora's domain is frozen! Because if you want to fuck with the Zoras in a Zelda game, that's just the thing to do. Unlike in Ocarina though, we're going to unfreeze it, using Chekhov's meteorite. In a really cool scene, the molten boulder plunges into the spring and sends the water flowing all the way from Zora's domain down the river and filling Lake Hylia. The ghost of the Zora Queen appears to offer her gratitude for saving her people, prompting my favorite line from Midna. Not to be rude, but we didn't exactly do it for you. Link jumps into the water to ride the current down to Lake Hylia, but in the most insultingly stupid moment in series history, the game has him black out for the journey so it doesn't have to explain how he got past this fucking gate on the river. Don't you love it when a game respects your intelligence? So if somehow you're still playing after that bullshit, then you were rewarded with the longest tier collecting slog yet. This one is even more grueling because we have already spent so much time in Lanayru Twilight, visited every area we are asked to find tears in, and even flown up the river on a bird already, which we have to do a second goddamn time. There's even a tier right outside the tavern in Hyrule Castle Town, so if you visited Elia earlier, congratulations, you wasted a whole trip and get to do it again. After collecting 15 tears, the final one appears in the middle of Lake Hylia. It turns out to be the Insect Queen and the game's only boss fight in wolf form. I like the reveal and the excitement of the moment more than the fight itself, which is dreadfully boring. The reward is worth it though. No more boring Twilight sections for the remainder of the game. Before setting you free to re-explore Hyrule's largest province, the Spirit Lanayru provides us with an Ocarina of Time style history lesson. And so finally, after 5 hours of almost nothing, we are provided the tiniest semblance of plot, and the Light Spirit teaches us the nature of the few shadows and the people who used them originally, who are later revealed to be Midna's ancestors. But now we are set loose into Lanayru Province, and there are a lot of things to do. Lake Hylia, Zora's Domain, the remainder of Hyrule Field, and Hyrule Castle Town are all opened up for you to discover lots of fun minigames, collectibles, and upgrades. Not all of these are useful, of course. In fact, very little of it is. You didn't really expect Twilight Princess to suddenly fix a pervasive Zelda problem of lackluster side quest rewards, right? It's too much to ask for a 13th installment to progress and evolve a series. Things should always stay the same. Exploring the nooks and crannies of the field and of the individual areas is a lot of fun, even more so than the main quest. I just wish there was any sort of incentive for doing so. So as always, you have to force yourself into collecting everything for nothing more than completion's sake. I can't overstate how sad this is. As I follow the progression of the series, I've seen every game expand and evolve in meaningful ways. But with the previous game and this one, I'm finding myself addressing the same issues. Instead of fixing the problems and limitations of older games, we emulate them. Instead of expanding on new ideas, we discard them. We're at the 13th game in the series, and it's laughably similar to the 5th. It's becoming pretty damn hard to keep saying, maybe next time. Anyways, heart pieces now require 5 for a container, making each one even less valuable if that were possible. There are also 60 Poe souls, which only come out at night and eventually lead to 200 rupees. There are 24 golden bugs, which are traded for rupees as well as wallet upgrades. But rupees are about as useless as ever in Twilight Princess. You only need around 450 to beat the game, and there's nothing really worth buying besides bombs. There are, however, 2 heart pieces that increase the count by 1,000 each. This is another crucial reason to go for all heart pieces, because then rupees aren't as bad a reward and exploring becomes even more fun. There's only a small handful of upgrades that could potentially be considered worthwhile. The Hylian shield returns in quite an odd dilemma. The only difference between it and the starting shield is that it's not flammable. But after the Goron Mines, there's actually no more fire in the game. So that's kind of weird, and it's perfectly easy to make it through the whole game on just the Ordon shield. So now I buy it solely for the aesthetic upgrade, because Link needs all the help he can get in this game. Another is the Hawkeye, which adds a sniper scope to the bow. It's pretty fun, not really practical most of the time, but if I can remember to use it, I can at least make feeble attempts to spruce up the gameplay a bit here and there. Another is, let's see, the magic armor, I guess? It shields you from damage at the cost of continuously draining rupees. So, situational in theory, I suppose? The problem here, of course, being that Twilight Princess's enemies deal almost no damage, so it's the equivalent of bringing a bulletproof vest to a water gun fight. The remaining 2 sword skills are the Mortal Draw, which at the cost of Z-targeting is another insta-kill on enemies, as if there was somehow a need for that, and the Jump Strike, which I can't remember ever actually using, besides to shorten a couple of boss fights. And besides your essential bottles and quivers and bomb bags, there are no other noteworthy upgrades to speak of. There are no songs to learn because there is no musical instrument, casually removing another important method of interacting with the environment. Neither are there any magic spells, because the entire magic system was axed as well. Now, I'm no expert, but I think if you're going to just remove genuinely important concepts like these, you should probably replace them with something at least as interesting, or at least fucking something, period. By simply removing entire mechanics, nothing positive is accomplished. The game ends up easier to autopilot and harder to generate immersion. Once you've explored to your heart's content, or realized that you were wasting your time doing so, it's time to finally check in on Ilia in Hyrule Castle Town. The town is kind of strange in that it uses that weird fixed camera angle from Ocarina. I assume that in Ocarina this was used to hide that the town probably wasn't fully rendered. So not something I'm on board with recreating here because it causes Hyrule Castle Town to feel somewhat odd and uncomfortable, which is a shame because the town itself is decently interesting. There's a pretentious shop that you can't enter before getting your shoes shined, and the clerk is a classist a-hole who won't even consider selling to the likes of you. But if you help fund the purchase of the shop by Mallow, that funny asshole kid from Ordon, he transforms it into Mallow Mart, which is absolutely hilarious. Ilia can be found in Telma's Bar, the hub of a little group of freedom fighters who help you find some dungeons later. I call them freedom fighters, but they're not really fighting for freedom against anything because, again, this whole occupation of Hyrule has had no visible repercussions, and there is no tangible threat or any sense of urgency. Generally, you like to see stakes and tension increase as the story progresses, but here the world has only become less and less threatening. What follows is another horseback fight scene, this one an escort mission of Ilia to Kakariko Village, and one that I actually enjoy. It's way more exciting, chaotic, and challenging. Instead of chasing after monsters, we're running away from them. And we have to keep track of the carriage, which is under constant siege from birds dropping bombs and riders shooting arrows. Even the Gale Boomerang gets its moment to shine, as it's used to put out the carriage when it catches fire, as well as detonate bombs before they're dropped. After this mission, we are granted the Zora armor, which lets Link breathe underwater so we can sink to the bottom of Lake Hylia and enter the third dungeon. This is the Lakebed Temple, and it's one of the best dungeons in the series, and a welcome return of the Majora's Mask-style puzzle boxes. The central room features a great staircase that can move into 4 different positions, which by itself is already pretty tricky for navigation, but gets more complex after we send water flowing into the room. And this is one of the rare moments in the game where you have to understand the layout, identify a puzzle, and be deliberate in solving it. We have to realize that the lever which would turn the staircase to the correct position is missing, and the solution is to use the claw shot as a makeshift lever. An absolutely brilliant puzzle. Besides that, the rest of the dungeon is just a blast, with lots of fun claw shot moments, water flow puzzles, and an underwater maze. The boss of the dungeon is Morpheal, a tentacle monster who I've always struggled with, until I came up with the brilliant idea to stand just out of his reach. When he comes out of the ground, he's revealed to be the biggest monster in series history, but if you think that means the fight will be challenging, kindly remember what game you're playing. He goes down no problem and we get the final Fuse Shadow. Immediately after exiting the dungeon, we are ambushed by Zant, and so finally we get to meet this dude and things start to get interesting. He attacks the Light Spirit, curses Link, starts torturing Midna, and steals the Fuse Shadows from her. It's pretty badass in the sense that we've spent the whole game to this point collecting these things, just for him to immediately take them. I do have to wonder, however, why he doesn't take all 4 Fuse Shadows, instead of leaving Midna with the one she wears on her head. Cutscenes are better than ever in Twilight Princess, and edited to be way more exciting. And this is one of the game's best, with a lot of much needed character moments for both Midna and Zant. We finally learn Zant's motivation for the invasion, which is pretty straightforward. He wants the Twilight people to retake the Light World. What I'm not sure of is why he doesn't just do it already. He's already seized control of the castle and has an army of Shadow Beasts who have proven capable of taking out the Light Spirits. We may have restored the Light Spirits, but what's to stop them from simply attacking again? The game never bothers to explain this, and in fact Zant seems entirely unconcerned with all the Twilight being gone. Like all of the game's main characters, he barely even acknowledges Link in this scene. Instead, he spouts more nonsense that doesn't make sense, saying he needs Midna. But why does he possibly need her? He already has the power of both his cryptic god and of the Fuse Shadows, and he has the ability to turn all Twilight citizens into monsters entirely under his control. And if he does actually need Midna, I guess as a PR rep or something, then why did he curse and exile her? Seems pretty counterproductive. So in our first fucking encounter with the guy, Zant has already proven himself to be a nonsensical villain with questionable motive and apparently no drive to keep his plan in motion. Yikes. Anyway, Zant attacks Midna, and what follows is the game's most memorable sequence, where we have to rush a dying Midna to Hyrule Castle in Zelda. The music during the scene is breathtaking. And then obviously we have the much maligned enemy music that constantly interrupts and breaks the immersion of the moment, which is an obvious bug because it doesn't interrupt the main Hyrule Field music. It seems like every time Twilight Princess has a moment where things start to get real promising, it has to ruin it somehow. And this in particular should have been an easy fix for the HD version, but that would involve effort. Why put an effort when you can do nothing, charge full price, and have your product gobbled up anyway? The path to Zelda involves traversing the same route up through Hyrule Castle that we took at the beginning of the game, only this time we have to make the climb without the aid of Midna. I love this because it adds even more emotion to the scene, really making you feel the weight of having to go on without Midna's help. But we have to press on for her sake and do whatever it takes. On reaching Zelda, we get the game's most touching moment, where the only thing Midna asks of the princess is to save Link. Aww, don't you love when characters grow and change like real people? It's too bad that Link doesn't get a moment like this, but even so, we've already formed what is easily the strongest friendship in the series to this point, which characters like Saria and Ilia could stand to learn something from. Zelda suggests seeking out the Master Sword, and this is another weird twist of Twilight Princess that I like. The Master Sword is not the blade of destiny to smite evil like it always is, but instead is just a means to lift a curse. Hey, whatever works. Midna then asks if Zelda knows where to find the Mirror of Twilight, which is the bridge between the Light World and the Twilight Realm. Zelda responds with, "I think I finally understand who and what you are, Midna," which is confusing to me because the previous scene with Zelda indicated that the two characters had met at least once before already, so I'm not quite sure what we're meant to infer from this line, other than Zelda has now guessed correctly that Midna is in fact the princess of the Twilight Realm, but it's a strange leap in logic that knowing about the mirror equals princess of the realm. But this is a minor point. The real question is, why does Midna want Link to find the mirror? The only reason I can think of is that she wants him to take down Zant, but why would she assume that Zant would be in the Twilight Realm when we just saw him in the Light World not 20 minutes ago? It doesn't make any sense considering what we recently learned about his motivation. And most of the rest of the game involves the mirror, so essentially the entire second half of the story is based on a serious gap in logic. So that's not a good sign for a story that has so far struggled to maintain interest. Another glaring question. How does Midna not know where the mirror is? She literally came from the Twilight Realm, and the mirror is the only way to and from the place. So how did she get to the Light World if not via the mirror? It's like landing in Denver and saying you don't know where the fucking airport is. I would say the story is not holding up under scrutiny, but this barely qualifies as scrutiny. I'm just trying to make sense of basic, vital plot elements, which I guess is a fatal mistake in playing Twilight Princess. Zelda is so moved by Midna's selflessness that she decides to sacrifice her own life to save her. It's a nice moment, and one that in my opinion should have been Zelda's final appearance in this game. Like the Master Sword serving a purpose different from its usual, Zelda could have existed solely for this moment because she's not remotely important to the rest of the story. Twilight Princess had an amazing opportunity for the classic Zelda players to feature in more minor roles that serve a more unique story involving Midna and Zant and their people. Killing off the title character halfway through the game would have gone down as one of the most memorable moments in series history, and undoubtedly satiated the fans who were so desperately craving their dark and mature Zelda game. But that would involve real nerve on the part of the developers, who were too far gone trying to please everyone. So the princess comes back at the end of the game for no real reason, completely undermining the impact of her sacrifice in this scene.
Hooray!
Now it's time to head for the Sacred Grove to find the Master Sword, and again this is one of my favorite moments of the game. The Sacred Grove is aesthetically gorgeous, and the music is a beautiful rendition of Saria's theme. Maneuvering through the grove is tricky because new paths will open up off-screen with no notice, so in classic Lost Woods fashion, it's easy to get disoriented. At the end of the grove lies the ruins of the Temple of Time, which is guarded by two statues who require solving a puzzle to gain entry. I like the idea behind one final challenge guarding the sword, but depending on your affinity for this type of puzzle, it could drag on and kill the inertia of the scene. As predicted by the princess, the Master Sword is able to lift the curse of Link's lycanthropy, and more importantly, it allows us to transform in and out of wolf form at will. This, by extension, lets us warp at will too. It's never explained why, but for some reason Midna is only able to warp Wolf Link, which can be a bit annoying trying to find a spot out of the public eye to transform. With the new ability plus the Claw Shot, we are now poised for another bout of side questing, including the Malamart acquisition and the start of the Poe soul hunting quest. Afterward, we can find one of Telma's gang at Lake Hylia who points us in the direction of Gerudo Desert, which can only be accessed via cannon. In addition to causing the area to feel like a weird artificial appendage of Hyrule, the desert itself is pretty unremarkable. It's relatively barren and entirely uninteresting. It doesn't hold a candle to the same area from Ocarina, with the fortress and the haunted wasteland and the awesome music. At the end of the desert is a little rundown fort that leads to the entrance of the 4th dungeon. But before all of that, Midna stops us to provide some more important backstory. She explains how the original interlopers who wielded the Fused Shadows were banished for their crimes into what would become known as the Twilight Realm. There they formed their own society, and over generations eventually became the Twilight people of Midna and Zant. Midna reveals with much resentment that she is a descendant of the banished interlopers, which, duh, literally every Twilight citizen would be descended from the first settlers, but also, that was however many hundreds of generations ago. The realm is now described by Midna herself as a peaceful place, so what's with this contempt against her ancestry? We all probably have some assholes in our lineage. The 4th dungeon is the Arbiter's Grounds, which is one of Twilight Princess's most popular dungeons, but I can't understand why, and to me it's easily one of the worst. It shamelessly rehashes the puzzle of tracking down 4 Poes who have stolen the flames from some torches, even to the point where the 4th Poe splits into 4 and you have to identify the real one. Remember Ocarina of Time?
I clapped when I saw it!
And aren't dungeons more fun when they make great use of their item? Well, get this dungeon took me 34 minutes, and I got the spinner at 30 and a half. And yeah, obviously I know what I'm doing, but what the fuck kind of ratio is that? Getting the dungeon item 90% of the way into the dungeon? It's like showing up at an amusement park an hour before it closes. At the end of the dungeon, we run into Zant again. See, look, he's not in the Twilight Realm. False alarm, we don't need to find the mirror after all. He's right there, let's get him. But nope, Link in this game is just as dumb as the one in Wind Waker.
Oh wow!
Zant raises from the dead the giant dinosaur fossil Stallard, the best boss in Twilight Princess and the best in the series since Goat. The fight is an absolute blast. The method for defeating him is so creative, and both phases are pure fun. Growing up, I kept a save file right before the boss so I could fight him whenever. Upon exiting the dungeon, we finally arrive at the mirror chamber. But uh-oh, the mirror has been shattered. Now who would do such a thing? Who would stand to gain from severing the link between the two worlds? It couldn't be this guy, because there are already too many plot holes surrounding the mirror and we couldn't possibly fit in even more, right? I thought that Zant's whole game plan was that he's supposed to be bringing over his Twilight people to reclaim the light world. So how in fuck is breaking the mirror helping with that? How are we supposed to take seriously a villain whose actions are dumb as shit and actively work against his end goal? So never mind that we just saw Zant 10 minutes ago in the light world, we are meant to believe that he is back in the Twilight world for no reason and somehow broke the mirror from the inside and trapped himself there. I'm sorry, but at this point, not even Scott fucking Sterling could save this story. This is too stupid. I discussed in the very first episode about how crucial I believe story is to the Legend of Zelda series. And Twilight Princess completely drops the ball, offering a plot that makes no sense, ideas that don't amount to anything, and potential that goes shamelessly unrealized. Compared to other Zelda titles with weak stories like Oracle of Seasons, where the plot takes a backseat and gets itself out of the way, it's more of a problem for Twilight Princess to have such a bad story because it's as front and center as it is in games like Wind Waker and Ocarina. So, a bunch of random faceless sages appear to offer up a flashback featuring none other than your motherfucking boy himself, Ganondorf. Design-wise, this Ganondorf is pretty badass. Personality-wise, he has no personality. And story-wise, I may as well bang my fucking head on the wall. Here is where we learn that Twilight Princess is actually a sequel to Ocarina of Time, and by extension Majora's Mask, taking place in the timeline where Link was sent back to his childhood. I guess what went down is that young Link warns Zelda about Ganondorf and the impending apocalypse he brings, and the two are somehow able to get Ganondorf arrested, completely overlooking the fact that Zelda already knew that Ganondorf was evil. But whatever, Ganondorf is sentenced to execution, but at the last minute, he is somehow Deus Ex Machina the Triforce. Okay, so fuck you, Ganondorf from Wind Waker and Ocarina, and all the shit you went through in both games to secure the Triforce? If the plot demands it, you can just get it for no reason. That's just good storytelling.
And who has a better story?
Ganon and his minions.
Oh, and then at the end of the game, he loses it again with the same amount of explanation.
Easy come, easy go.
So Ganondorf kills a sage with his fist instead of the big-ass sword for some reason. But since the sages were conveniently performing the execution at the Mirror Chamber, they are able to use the mirror to banish him to the Twilight Realm. Can we think about that for a second? These sages are fucking assholes. Sure, let's send this all-powerful demigod who just acquired the Triforce of Power to this peaceful, reclusive world. Your problem now, idiots! So now we have another player to keep track of in this heaping, tumorous mass of shite that masquerades as plot, and if you thought Zant's motivation was vague, wait till you see this crap. Ganondorf wants to house his power in Zant, which will allow him to manifest back into the light world somehow, so that he can sit in a castle and eventually do something involving merging light and shadow. Look, I like Ganondorf as a villain. He's in my top 20 Triforce of Power-wielding, evil incarnate scourges of Hyrule's peace and happiness. But this is just an embarrassing performance. He somehow encompasses all of the worst elements of his appearances in Ocarina and Wind Waker, while retaining none of what made him a compelling villain in either game. He inherits his one-dimensional evilness from Ocarina, but without the cunning and constant threatening presence, and he inherits his lackluster screen time of Wind Waker, but without the wisdom of reflection and character development. So in essence, he's completely regressed to his SNES days of one-note Puppet Master. Regression over progression in Twilight Princess? Who ever heard of such a thing? So the rest of the game is spent gathering the mirror shards with nary a mention of Zant or Ganondorf. The pacing of the story comes to a halt, but the pacing of the gameplay speeds up, and the remainder of the game is spent rocketing from dungeon to dungeon. Which I don't think is inherently a bad thing, but coming off the slow and dramatic first half, it makes for uncomfortably uneven pacing. Each of the remaining members of Telma's Freedom Fighters guides you to the next 3 dungeons, but to the surprise of no one, they are all out one at a time, and so the dungeons must be completed in designated order. We start by heading up the icy mountain of Snow Peak to the mansion home of a friendly Yeti couple for the game's 5th dungeon. A wonderfully original setting, engaging atmosphere, interesting puzzles, and a fun plot twist turned boss fight constitute what is easily one of Twilight Princess's best dungeons. I especially like finding a key that is so well hidden it requires the compass to find, the first time in the series where the compass is necessary, unless you're extremely observant of the cracks in the snow. So remember that awesome part with chasing the Skull Kid through the Sacred Grove earlier? Well, how about we do it again, so as to water it down and add some pointless filler before the next dungeon. We return to the ruins of the Temple of Time, and in an awesome homage to Ocarina, we open a magic gate to the past and step into the temple in its prime. By dropping the Master Sword into the ancient pedestal, a hidden staircase appears that leads to the 6th dungeon, which is just called Temple of Time. This is yet another super creative and fun dungeon, and it's the only one that's paced in a unique way. Most of Twilight Princess's dungeons are structured in the same manner, which is explained beautifully by Mark Brown, but essentially you start from a central room and head east, then return to the central room and head west, then return to the central room and head north to the boss. It's an effective way of keeping the dungeons simple to navigate, but it does get repetitive. But Temple of Time is completely different, and it's more like Tower of Hera from A Link to the Past, where you have to climb 8 floors of the same size. But the dungeon doesn't end at the top. Instead, we acquire the Dominion Rod, which in its element is one of the series' most fun and creative items, and we have to use it to maneuver a giant statue back down to the ground floor. Maneuvering the statue through the same rooms is a fun way to recontextualize the puzzles and makes for some very interesting moments. My problem with Temple of Time is the puzzles are too easy and the dungeon is too short. I think 10 or even 12 floors with some more complex puzzles would have been better. Also, the boss sucks. Ooh, what's it gonna be? A giant statue that we have to take control of to make it harm itself? Oh, it's a spider. After this dungeon, we have to endure another crappy bout of pointless filler. The Dominion Rod has lost its power, Elia has lost her memory, a book has lost its letters, I've lost my patience, and restoring all this junk is entirely uninteresting. At one point we find ourselves in the Hidden Village, where we finally get some gameplay variety and have to sneak around some bokoblins. Wait, just kidding, there are no stealth sections of the game, you just have to murder everyone. After this, you are given the key to Elia's memory, but strangely, you don't actually have to finish restoring her memory. If you're so inclined, you can just leave her an amnesiac and never see her again. I don't necessarily feel compelled to finish a side quest about a character that I don't really care about. I would have loved it if Elia were made into an interesting character, or if we were given just a semblance of reason to care about her, other than she seems nice. The only thing I like about Elia is her music. I think an easy way to remedy this would have been to just pull the trigger and have a romantic relationship between Link and Elia. It's clearly framed that way, where she gives you her charm to no usual jingle, only her music. But the Zelda franchise seems to have such an aversion to love, and I want to know why. It's among the simplest and most effective ways of getting us invested in characters. It's one of the most important elements of human emotion.
The secret ingredient is love.
Yeah, we had Cafe and Andrew, and it was nice, but our boy Link is overdue for a compelling love interest. I don't care if it's Elia, or Midna, or Telma, or Shad, or fucking Malamart Cashier. Just give me some love in my Zelda. Whether you choose to restore Elia's memory or not, our next destination is the 7th dungeon, City in the Sky. This one ties with Lakebed Temple as my favorite dungeon in the game, and luckily for me, it's also the longest. It's the most transcendent hour in all of Twilight Princess, with amazing stretches devoid of solid ground, terrific puzzles, and appearances by both of the game's best enemies. The heavenly aesthetic is on point, and the music is amazingly surreal. It's the only dungeon music in the game that I find to be truly memorable. Which is a shame, but not the biggest of deals because, as a whole, Twilight Princess has a terrific soundtrack with a lot of highlights. Much of the score goes for a relaxing, chill vibe that helps elicit feelings of leisurely recreation. Whether or not this is good for the overall tone of the game, I'm not so convinced. In fact, I'd say it clashes horribly, but even so, I still like the songs. Not all of them, though. The enemy music, for instance, is annoying as hell and triggered way too easily. The dungeon music, like I said, is not great, and these wolf howling sections are ear torture. But I do like the nostalgia of howling the old songs like the Song of Healing and the Requiem of Spirit. At the end of City in the Sky, you face off against a dragon in an incredibly badass scene, in high winds atop the floating city, and then ascending into the sky as a thunderstorm rolls in, latching onto the dragon's back and crashing him to the ground. Unfortunately, the fight itself is dreadfully boring. It drags on in repetitive fashion and is not remotely challenging. A huge letdown for a potentially incredible boss fight. For defeating him, we receive the final shard of the mirror, and there's no filler now. We can head directly to the mirror chamber to enter the Twilight Realm. Sadly, however, we can't explore the realm beyond the palace, much like in Wind Waker how you couldn't explore the submerged Hyrule at all. Another big missed opportunity for scope and immersion. The Palace of Twilight is the game's 8th dungeon, and visually it's amazing, not just in the lighting of the surrounding twilight, but also in the glowing alien designs of the walls and platforms. The dungeon involves bringing balls of light through 2 wings of the palace while being pursued by these creepy floating hands. As scary as they are though, they're laughably slow and easy to stop. And if they manage to grab the ball, it's no big deal because you can just shoot them down. They're so non-threatening that you can even manipulate them to cheese puzzles. After returning both the light balls, they infuse the Master Sword with light, and with this power it is able to take out every enemy in the palace in one hit. It's pretty badass, a rare moment of great pacing in Twilight Princess and a neat replacement to the light arrows. But for some reason, you lose it after the dungeon. What an absolute joke! At the top of the palace we confront Zant. Again, I still have no idea why the fuck he's here, but we're past that. And by this point, any previous notion of this being an interesting villain is long gone. Shedding his intimidating pretense, he's revealed to be just a fucking weirdo who tantrums around and complains about the royal family being lazy or some shit. He also confirms that Ganondorf was indeed the source of his mysterious rise to power, and we see a flashback of Spirit Ganondorf possessing Zant. Wow, what a catastrophe. Who could have seen this coming?
What did you think was gonna happen?
Ganondorf says, whatever you desire, I shall desire it too. You sure you don't got that the wrong way around there, buddy? Shouldn't it be whatever Ganondorf desires, Zant shall too, thus prompting the takeover of the light world? Zant says Ganondorf's desire was to merge shadow and light to make darkness, whatever the fuck that means.
The time has come for light to rejoin shadow.
But later is changed to blot out the light forever. Pick a lane there, Grandpa. Is it too much to ask for a villain with an actual motive? Zant goes on to say that Ganondorf has already been reborn in the light world. I'm sorry, what? When did this happen? Shouldn't this crazy materialization of the main villain occur on screen? Like right after defeating Zant or something? That seems like a pretty important scene to skip. Midna violently blows up Zant and then she says it's time to go to Hyrule Castle to confront Ganondorf. Oh, I guess he's there then? How does she know that? Well, as it turns out, at some point Midna had acquired the legendary Triforce of Main Character. When she touched it, it split into 3, giving herself the Triforce of Script Foresight, Ganondorf the Triforce of Plot Convenience, and Link the Triforce of Phasing Through Gates. But the game doesn't mention this. So, what is Ganondorf doing in the castle exactly? Is he waiting for Link? That would assume he even knows about Link's existence, which is a stretch considering we've had fuck all encounters with Ganondorf so far. Isn't a villain better when they have some sort of relationship with the main character, even the tiniest goddamn bit? I sincerely believe Twilight Princess would have been better off without Ganondorf, had they instead focused on developing Zant and Midna. It's as if someone wrote a script for an interesting new story, and then Kathleen Kennedy showed up and started erasing shit, because market research says we need to bring back the familiar bad guy. But if you're gonna have Ganondorf, either make him an interesting character, or make him the evil mindless puppet master that materializes from Zant's body upon defeating him, like in A Link to the Past. The fight begins immediately, and the game ends right here in the Mirror Chamber. At least then you have the build-up of confronting Zant, the awesome final form of the Master Sword powered up with light, you have a more challenging and memorable final boss, and you don't have to endure one of the all-time shittiest finales in series history. But instead, the Master Sword reverts, the pacing fizzles, the tension dissipates, and we have to head to Hyrule Castle for the game's worst dungeon. By this point, Twilight Princess is way overstaying its welcome, and I have little patience left for Hyrule Castle's bland aesthetic, shitty rehashed puzzles, and monotonous combat with the same goddamn enemies. As far as final dungeons go, it's a pathetic showing when compared to those of previous games, and an absolute embarrassment when compared to the same dungeon from several games later. Ganondorf abides at the top of the castle, sitting in a chair and just being evil, I guess. Oh, and Zelda is there too somehow. Ganondorf spouts some generic crap and then he possesses Zelda's body for the first phase of a 4-part final boss, and please God, I just want the game to end. We defeat the princess and then Ganondorf transforms into Ganon, who admittedly looks pretty awesome, and the fight is at least somewhat entertaining. I do have to question the continuity, however. Twilight Princess takes place in Child Timeline, making this Ganon's first ever appearance, and I'm not sure what I meant to take from it. I thought Ganon was the pure manifestation of Ganondorf's hatred and malice, and when he transforms at the end of Ocarina, it's a terrifying moment of culmination. So by having him transform for one fight, just to transform back and fight some more doesn't make any sense. It's clear that Ganon is only here because there's no possible way we're allowing ourselves to be outdone by Ocarina. So Ganondorf and Midna have a fight, and we teleport to Hyrule Fields, Zelda gets light arrows, Ganondorf breaks Midna's fused shadow. So is she dead? No, she's gonna materialize out of nowhere, the 3rd time a character has done so in this finale alone. Then we fight Ganondorf on horseback, and I find this fight to be extremely annoying. Then we crash, and it's time for a sword duel with Ganondorf, because there's no possible way we're allowing ourselves to be outdone by Wind Waker. Let's just get this over with. Oh no, here he comes. Here comes Ganondorf. He's coming. unbelievably laughable final boss caps a finale with no stakes, atop a story that makes no sense, serving characters I don't care about, and all that's left to do is hope for a better final boss next time. Hope for a better game next time. I grew to accept over time all of the issues and problems that I've had with Twilight Princess, and I'm not as adamantly outspoken against or hold the same animosity toward it that I did when I was a 17-year-old edgelord. But that doesn't mean I grew to love it. All of these problems aren't magically made better by some spell that exists over the game. In fact, the game feels very weird overall, and I don't enjoy the dull tone. It's dark, yeah, kind of, but it's not Majora's Mask dark that serves an immersive world. It's just melodramatic. Everything is darkness this, shadow that, like okay, I fucking get it. What I'm really interested in is how does it make me feel while playing? If they wanted the game to be dark, they could have done it in ways that made you actually feel tense and threatened. Show some ramifications to the invasion and occupation of Hyrule. Have Zelda die from her sacrifice. Show Ganondorf's execution and his murder of the sage instead of this weird punch. Have the fused shadows actually demonstrate evil power like they are built up to and something you should be scared of collecting. The point is, it's more important for a story to offer a reason to get invested rather than just trying to be dark for arbitrary reasons. Another reason it feels weird is that the main quest itself is actually the weak point of the game. Besides the Master Sword segment, all the main events that progress the plot are completely uninteresting. Collecting the tears to lift the twilight, collecting the fused shadows, collecting the mirror shards, helping Elia and the kids, being confined to the palace in the Twilight Realm, and everything up through this final battle with Ganondorf. None of it is memorable, and they are all among the lousiest parts of the game. I think that's a real big problem when you don't care about the main quest at all, and only ever look forward to the moments you are let loose in a dungeon or a field to have sporadic bouts of fun. But what bouts of fun they are! Twilight Princess's greatest strengths are its dungeons and overworld, which thankfully are major portions of the experience. Exploring both Hyrule Field and its surrounding areas is endlessly enjoyable for all the fun little nooks and crannies to discover everywhere. And at 9 dungeons, Twilight Princess reinstates that prime number from Ocarina after a noticeable dip in the past several games. The dungeons are great for making tremendous use of the items which, in their element, are insanely fun. Way better than the last games in any case. Overall, I enjoyed Twilight Princess a lot more than I did Minish Cap. It was much easier to pick up and harder to put down, and took over 18 hours before it started feeling like a chore, rather than like 2.5. And of course we have Midna, who despite the nonsensical plot surrounding her, still shines through as a beacon of sass and charisma, and a character I would not trade for anything. Except maybe a better game. So even though I would call Twilight Princess a game that I like overall, it remains one of the most frustrating titles in Zelda history. Frustrating for the nonsensical plot, for the shoddy pacing, for the brain-dead combat, for the lack of growth and development of Link, for a lack of an interesting villain, and frustrating for all the missed potential. But more important than all of these problems, and the single biggest takeaway from Twilight Princess that I've been hammering home throughout this review, is this notion of regression over progression. We removed one mechanic or interesting idea too many, and added almost nothing of value. One of the reasons I think why people love this game is because, to them, it's quintessential Zelda. Lots of dungeons, big field to ride around in, lots of items to solve puzzles with, the whole shebang. They don't care how it did or did not evolve the series. It's the perfect Zelda game to them. And I completely understand, that's a totally valid reason to love the game. Not that you even need one, you do fucking you and do it proudly. I knew someone who liked Twilight Princess because she just likes wolves, and that's fantastic. I have no desire to take that from her or from anyone. But as a lifelong Zelda fan, and someone who more than anything desires to see the series grow and change with each new installment, I'm unforgiving of Twilight Princess for failing in this key area to meaningfully progress the series, and instead backpedaling and relying solely on the strength of its predecessors who actually did their fair share of evolution. Twilight Princess is much more like Minish Cap in this regard, in that it's a nice burst of Zelda. What you see is what you get, you'll be right at home playing it and won't have to worry too much about leaving your comfort zone. No envelopes to push, no surprises in store, and as a result, no emotion or excitement. So what does this mean for the future of the series? Well, one good thing I could say about Nintendo's decision to make Twilight Princess is that at least they got it out of the way. If the fans didn't receive their realistic Zelda in the mid-2000s, they'd still be clamoring for it. So at least that's over and done. Nintendo never attempted the style again, and instead went back to choosing art styles for themselves that they liked, instead of to target a market. This is not about graphics. It reveals that Nintendo was over and done with trying to please everyone, and instead were intent on going back to their own inspirations. Whether or not you ended up liking their next ideas is another story, and I would even venture irrelevant and argue to the grave that taking risks and trying new things is far better than stagnating and looking to the past for ideas to rehash. But let's look into specifics of what exactly I believe needs to be addressed. The most pressing issue that I think the series needs to solve right now is the side quests. By providing a compelling reason to explore and talk to people beyond heart pieces and rupees, you the player will become way more immersed in the world. Plus, it's fun to be rewarded for doing things. It's an important feedback loop in games, and it's really noticeable when it is lacking. Ocarina of Time was so much harder to put down because of tangible upgrades like spells and optional items and everything I talked about in that video. By 8 years later, we needed to be expanding on these, not getting worse. I also don't mind if the rewards for side quests are just deeper looks into interesting characters. Majora's Mask had this down pat. But starting with Wind Waker, and especially with these last two games, things have gotten really terrible, and I think this needs to be addressed as soon as possible. Beyond that, I'd also like to see an improvement to combat, and specifically, I want to see more challenging enemies that are immune to mashing and require more thought to take down. Have them also deal more substantial damage, thereby requiring more attention to health, inventory, and potions, providing a better reason to collect heart pieces and upgrade equipment, and get us way more engaged in the combat, all of which would be profoundly positive for the series, and all boiling down to just this one simple change to enemies. I would also like to see the series evolve Ganondorf, whether that means giving him fresh twists to stay interesting, or moving on from him completely. He was great for 2 games, but was so thoroughly massacred in Twilight Princess that I practically loathe to see him again anytime soon. I want a villain with actual personality, and who has a real rivalry with Link. Someone that can deliver on a game's worth of build-up to provide a satisfying final boss. I'd also love to see a villain that isn't generically evil, but maybe has complex ideologies that seem understandable and acts out of best intentions.
Sue turned her back on the Earth Kingdom. You were gone. I had to do something.
These are the things that I would like to see changed immediately, but in a more general sense, I do eventually want to see some real modifications to what we might call the Zelda formula. What is the Zelda formula? Well, it's mostly arbitrary nonsense, but I suppose what it refers to is the classic structure of the series of field, dungeon, dungeon item, use dungeon item on boss, field, repeat. At some point you'll find a better sword and shield and probably collect a bunch of artifacts of the week. Or else we need changes to existing mechanics or existing inventory structure. I don't care what the change is, just something. Whether it's a change to the story structure, change to the pacing, change to the controls, change to the combat, a new take on dungeons, a new take on items, or hopefully, for the love of God, my Link X Anyone romance story. Whatever the idea may be, I welcome it from Nintendo, so long as we don't lose sight of the essence of the series, and whatever is changed can prove to deliver a unique and satisfying experience. Oh. Shit.